Les, I was reading your column about the marriage between Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera. Why don't you kind of fill us in? Ron said that he learned from his mistakes, I guess, of not having somebody on staff that was a head coach before when he brought in Jack Del Rio, and it seems to be a great fit.
Yeah, his first year in Carolina, he did not have a former head coach on his staff. I don't know how much he really considered it or thought it was something that was important, and he gets into it and realizes, gosh, I don't have anyone to bounce anything off of. And so after that, he always had somebody. You know, Norv Turner, for instance, was on his staff for a few years there in Carolina. And so it was something he definitely was interested in. You know, was going to make sure he did when he came here. At least he's always said that. But I think it was interesting that he hired Jack Del Rio because if you notice, a lot of Ron Rivera's hires are guys that he's worked with before, has a good connection with. He's a big connection guy. I think he always is kind of, a lot of coaches are like this, but I think he's big on wanting people that he could trust, that he sort of knows that they know what he likes and will think somewhat the same way. So to get a guy who he had never worked with before, I thought was always interesting, and so I kind of, you know, over the last few days, I kind of asked a little bit more about it. And how did this come about? You know, how did you two meet? You know, who put you two together? It turns out that Del Rio reached out last, you know, I guess, well, it's not last year anymore. It's 2019 at the end of the year. When Rivera was pretty deep in talks with Dan Snyder, and you know, Rivera was intrigued enough to fly to Florida and realize they kind of had a lot in common, and you know, it's been a pretty good fit. You think about everything that's happened with Rivera this year, and cancer, and you know, just all the chaos and craziness. I think, first of all, it's been good for him to have somebody to bounce things off of, but I think it's also good that they've had someone who was about 12-year head coach in the NFL to be able to kind of take over, because Rivera a lot of times hasn't been able to do the same things he'd do in the past.
No question about it. And then let's get into maybe some of the philosophical differences from last year, which was Greg Minuski and a 3-4 defense, to Jack Del Rio's defense. You write about how it kind of freed up even the interior defensive lineman. Obviously, adding Chase Young's a big difference, but you see that Montez Sweat is that much better in year two. Talk about what Del Rio brought to the table so that these guys could truly flourish.
Yeah, and I've wondered a lot about Sweat. You know, is Sweat just his improvement this year a product of Chase Young showing up? Obviously, that's probably some of it. But he's a different guy. He seems just different in the way he sort of, you know, we'll see him in his little Zooms. Of course, you can't see him in the locker room every day, but his whole approach is different. And he was talking about it the other night about how Del Rio's been a big part of sort of the change there. But even in the middle, I think that he was always, you'd look at these guys like Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, and, you know, Ioannidis is now hurt, but, you know, Tim Settle. And you always felt there was so much talent there, and it never felt like they were getting everything out of that in the old system. And it always made, so many people I talked to around the league would always say, how come these guys are playing a 3-4? They've got 4-3 personnel. Why aren't they playing? You know, when are we going to see the 4-3 there? And so it made some sense just to play the 4-3, but then the way that Del Rio does it, he's very aggressive. He wants those guys pushing forward at all times. And I think we're starting to see the payoff in that in the second half of this year as everyone sort of adjusted to it. I think Allen has had quietly very, very good year. Daron Payne, obviously, we see making big plays all the time. Settle has played very well, too, in the middle. You're starting to see just how good this defense could be up front if everybody's in the right spot and playing as aggressively as sort of, you know, that's what their skill set sort of is.
Les, let's get into the comments about potentially rotating the quarterbacks. Really kind of shocking all of us. Was that a rare moment of candor from a guy who's been through a lot this year, or was it calculated just to kind of plant a bug in Tampa? You know, what was it?
I was wondering that as sort of the thing went on yesterday, because he brought it up early. In fact, Rivera raised it off the first question in his press conference yesterday, or Zoom conference. And, you know, I don't know if he was just trying to raise it to sort of put that thought in Tampa's mind, hey, you guys better start preparing for two quarterbacks. You don't know what's going to happen here. It's a short week. We want to kind of throw a little, you know, wrench into your plans here. Or if he said, you know, as you said, it was a moment of candor, and he's like, yeah, I think we're doing this. I think it's very, very hard to do something like that. I think that goes against what most coaches would want. I'm sure it would go against what any starting quarterback would want, because you want them to get into a flow. And he spent the rest of the whole conference kind of backtracking from that. I don't know if he, kind of threw that out too far and then realized, oh, everyone's seizing on this, or, if the message was delivered and, he didn't want to go any further with it, but whatever. I find it hard to believe that's how they're going to come out to the game next week or on Saturday night. I just can't see that.
Is it possible, Les, that it was just to, in some ways, provide cover if he has to pull, Alex? Because he did acknowledge in the last game that it entered his mind. How could it not have, right? We all thought the same thing.
Yeah, but I don't know if he has to put down cover for that. I mean, would any of us be, shocked or outraged if that happened? It's given the way that Alex looked in the second half the other day, just physically moving around. I don't know that you would need cover for that. I again think it's more he just wants to put more thoughts into Bruce Arians' head of how you prepare for this game. I think that's more where that was coming from. I still find it hard to believe they'd come out and do that. Rotate quarterbacks. I could very easily see them playing two quarterbacks because they feel that Alex Smith just physically can't go anymore and they need to replace him. But I don't see, a series with this guy, a series with that guy, or even switching them out play to play. That would be great fun to cover, but I don't know that I would necessarily think that's the best plan for a playoff game right now.
All right, give us the scenario how they can pull this off. I mean, everyone's tweeting out expert picks, and no one's picking Washington, and I can't blame them. I love being an underdog. So I'm a fan, but I like being an underdog. Underdogs win all the time. But give me a scenario where we can do this, because it's hard to envision a place where we score more than 20 points, right? So I don't quite know how they'll do it.
Yeah, I agree, because I just don't know that there's enough offensively to do that right now, especially the way that defense is playing in Tampa. As aggressive as it is, and especially with Alex's limitations in moving around, I do think the one shot, and it's a shot that's always kind of out there in a game like this against Tom Brady, is you do have the right defensive front. He does not like to be hit. We've seen that, say, with some of those Giants teams that won Super Bowls against him. I mean, if you can get to him, if you can knock him down a few times, he didn't like that when he was in his 30s. He's certainly not going to like it in his 40s. And so that's the one shot. The one shot is Chase Young, I want Brady, going out there and getting Brady and Montez Sweat and that surge up the middle. If you make him uncomfortable, you've got a shot. Again, he's so good at getting the ball out fast, and they kind of got that timing and that system down now. He can kind of get around some of that, and I don't know that they have enough. They have enough to stop the weapons that he has offensively. But if you can get to him and knock him down, I think, and make him uncomfortable, that is the one shot you got.
What are we hearing on the injury front with Washington? McLaurin did play, but obviously didn't have like a huge impact. And then Antonio Gibson, kind of the same deal last week.
Yeah, I would figure it's going to be the same again. Maybe those guys will feel a little better and a little healthier. I don't know that McLaurin didn't have an impact because he wasn't able to get open, or did McLaurin not have an impact because Alex Smith wasn't able to extend the play and find him.
Right.
It's probably a little bit of both, and probably more the latter. I just don't know that offense was able to really do anything once Philadelphia realized, okay, this guy can't move the way he has in the past, even earlier this year. We'll see. That's the one I would worry about is what's Alex Smith's mobility. If it's a little better this week, and maybe it will, maybe it'll feel better, then that obviously gives him a little bit better shot.
Have you gotten any sense from Alex that this is the swan song? I know it's different because you guys aren't in the locker room. You're not able to develop those relationships. But are you getting any sense of that?
No, I haven't. And it's interesting that, we're not in the locker room this year, but I feel like compared to a couple years ago when he was the starting quarterback before the injury, I feel like Alex Smith's a lot more thoughtful and a little more open in some of these press conferences than he's probably been in the past. And given what he's been through, it's completely understandable. I look for hints and those, and I haven't gotten them. I don't know. you just don't bet against this guy anymore, right? I mean, after everything, I mean, how many times did I sit and write? There's no way Alex Smith is coming back. There's no way Alex Smith is coming back. Even up to the point when they put him on the active roster, I was like, well, they're not going to really put him in a game, right? Well, obviously we see what he's done, and I mean, he's led them to almost all their victories here. I mean, he's 5-1 as a starter, and I just don't. I know it doesn't look great right now, but I just not sure you ever say it can't happen,
right.
and then he can't play here another 2 or 3 years. I don't question anything anymore with him.
Right. You can't.